Hey everybody, it's Lindsay and I'm here today to share with you some distress ink blending and lifting. Now I am starting out with a piece of watercolor paper. This is Canson watercolor paper that measures 4 inches by 4¼ inches, I believe, so not quite a square, just a little off. And what I am doing is I'm using some distress inks here. I use the mini cubes just for storage purposes. I work in a small space, so storage is a big issue for me. So the smaller the container, the better. I'm also using the mini ink blending tool just because it doesn't leave such harsh lines as the square one does. It's what I prefer. Use what you have though. But what I started out with some festive berries, and I'm working in rainbow order, so red was festive berries, and then my orange was spice marmalade, and now I'm bringing in some mustard seed for my yellow color. Now you will notice that I always have 2 ink pads going at one time, and that is because I work between the two until I get the blend that I want between them, and then I will put that top color away. In this case it's going to be the orange, and I'll pull out my next color, which is the green, and then I'll work on blending the green and the yellow together. I'm also using my ink blending tool as sort of a guide of how large I want my blending or my little rows to go with the blending. And so that just helps me really keep these colors nice and even across the card, and I don't overkill with one certain color. Also, because I am working on watercolor paper, I am going to get a little bit of a better blend because it sits on top of the paper. It doesn't absorb in as much to the fibers, so I'm going to get a much better blend with this, and also it's going to lift off a lot more cleanly than on a regular piece of cardstock where the color bleeds into the paper and kind of dyes the fibers. This sits right on top, and it can get a little messy. You will notice that I had to bring in a piece of paper because my fingers were leaving smudges, so you just want to really take your time, blend between the two colors, watch what you're doing, and just pay attention and make sure your fingers aren't spreading color and bleeding it out and everything. So I moved on from the mustard seed and mowed lawn to some mowed lawn and peacock feathers, and blended those two together. And then once I was happy with the mowed lawn blending with the peacock feathers, I'm going to move on and bring in some seedless preserves for my final color, and then I'll move between the peacock feathers and the seedless preserves and really blend those out until I get the blend and also the intensity of color that I want from the two of them. And then that will finish it off, and that's really all you have to do. Now once I got all my color down, I just brought in my fingers with some water and splattered it all over the place. Now you can use a paintbrush, you can use a splatter brush, you can use a spray bottle. I like my fingers because I get more control that way, and I'm a little bit of a control freak. And then I let this sit. Now I paused my camera and let it sit for about 2 minutes, and then I came back in, laid down a paper towel, and soaked up that water. And you can see what a nice job this does of lifting off the watercolor paper. But you basically just want to blot up that water with your paper towel, and you might even get a little bit of your texture from your paper towel like I did, but it's all for the better. It adds to the character of the card. So for my sentiment on this card, I wanted to keep it all about the distress background, so I am using the Best Day Ever sentiment from Stampin' Up. You could use any really large sentiment you have for this. It would work great. I'm just using this because it's what I had. And I put this piece of cardstock in my MISTI because I'm going to need to stamp a few times. And I also went ahead and brought in my embossing bag, and I put down a heavy layer of that. Your distress ink stays wet for a long time, and it will have embossing powder stick to it, which I will be using. So if you choose to go this route, make sure you use that embossing bag. Now I'm going to go ahead and stamp this down with some versafine onyx black ink. And again, this is a pigment ink, so I'm going to be doing some heat embossing just to add a little bit more character to the card, a little bit more something, I guess. It was overly simple for me. So I went ahead and stamped that a few times with my MISTI since it is watercolor paper, and then I'm just going to sprinkle on some clear embossing powder. And I do this a few times, tap off the excess just to make sure I get it completely covered. Now once that's all covered and I've dusted off any little extra stray powders, I'm just going to bring in my heat tool and heat set this. And you can really see how cool this looks when you heat emboss. I just love the effect. I don't think it ever gets old no matter how many times I do it. So I just heat set that, and then I'm going to go ahead and put this card together because that's pretty much going to do it. I'm just going to go ahead and add some fun foam to the back of this panel. I've got double-sided adhesive on both sides, so I'll go ahead and remove the backing paper on the back side of the fun foam, and then I'm just going to attach this to a little black note card that I've made. And all I did was make it about 1/4 of an inch larger on all the sides, and that's pretty much how I made the note card. I'll go ahead and adhere this panel right onto that black note card. And one thing you want to remember when you're mailing this is distress ink. No matter how many times you re-wet this, it's going to react with water. So if you mail this and it goes through the rain, it might get a little messy. So your best bet for these types of cards is to enclose them in a plastic envelope, just to keep out any wetness that the card might encounter through the mail. Now to finish this off, I'm just going to add some moonshine sequins. I added quite a few to really bling this card out, and I'm using glossy accents to secure them and my quick sticks tool just to help me out to put these down on the card. And that will finish off this very simple but very pretty card. I hope you guys enjoyed this technique and video, and I hope you'll give it a try as well. As always, I will leave you guys with a close-up of this card and just a few pictures.